If you want to grow your sales, and who doesn't, you need to get involved with TMSA, Transportation Marketing and Sales Association. TMSA has been around for 100 years because it is a great place for transportation sales and marketing people to learn and grow. TMSA is holding an event called Elevate, and it is taking place June 9th, 10th, and 11th in New Orleans. I went to TMSA Elevate last year in Savannah, and it was fantastic. The leaders in our space are there, and they're sharing what's working for them. Please check the show notes for links to TMSA and TMSA Elevate, and I will see you in New Orleans. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. On the Logistics of Logistics, I talk to experts in logistics and transportation, warehousing, fulfillment, supply chain, and of course, technology. And during these interviews, I'm always the one asking the dumb questions. I ask the dumb questions so you don't have to. Today's topic is turning cold outreach into gold with my friend Matt Castriotta. Matt is the founder and CEO of Castriotta Growth Hacking. Prospecting is the toughest job in sales unless you're working with Matt and his team at Castriotta Growth Hacking. They will fill your calendar with high-quality sales leads. If you want to grow your sales, please take a listen to my convo with Matt. How's it going, Matt?
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for having me, Joe. My name is Matt Castriotta, and I'm with Castriotta Growth Hacking. And we're a marketing company based in St. Petersburg, Florida.
So what do you guys do?
I help my customers get appointments with either their prospects, their customers, their investors, new employees. I do it through different modalities, whether it's LinkedIn or email or text messaging or advertising.
Yep. Matt, I've known you for a few years. You reached out to me and we've talked, and I've always been fascinated by what you do and how you do it. And I've been doing some work with you over the last 6 months, and it's been fantastic. And it's opened my mind up to a lot of things. And one of the things I will say is the biggest problem in this space right now, it feels like, with people who call and people I talk to, is sales. And it's not so much once they get in the room or in the conference room, usually, the Zoom call or the Teams meeting, it's getting that Teams meeting. So when people say, oh, I'm a really good sales guy, to some extent, you're only a good sales guy after you get the meeting. And I think the upfront piece, whether we call it cold outreach or cold calling or prospecting, it's the heavy lifting in our space. Am I wrong to say that?
No, I would say that for most companies, getting to the appointment is the heavy lift for them. A lot of it just comes down to the fact that they don't have a good process in place that is repeatable. What a lot of top sales guys will do is they'll have their top 100 or 200 prospects. They have them on a continual cycle where they'll send them a piece of mail every single holiday. They'll email them, they'll call them on a schedule, and in a 15-month cycle, they'll close them, right? Now, that's enterprise selling. But if you want more immediate results, you have to find shippers that are actually looking for, what it is that you're looking for, or customers that are looking for what it is that you're looking for at that particular time. And that takes a level of cold outreach. And I think that's why a lot of people have that opinion, is because they look at their alternatives. And for the most part, cold outreach, for most people, they think is pretty expensive. Trade shows are expensive. A lot of people don't understand email. A lot of people don't understand LinkedIn and sponsored DMs or messages in general. And they don't understand how to put all that strategy together to put it into a process.
Yep. And I can tell you, I've talked to so many people who say this, hey, if you just get me in the room, Joe, if you just make an introduction for me. And I was like, and then I'll close it. And I always feel like, yeah, everybody feels like they have a fairly high rate of closings once you have a meeting. But it's the hard part is getting somebody on your calendar, getting someone's attention. And if you're a shipper or if you're an investor, whoever was being sold, sometimes they're being bombarded and you have to come up with the right way to message them, the right way to reach them. So 20 years ago, if we were having this call, wouldn't be a podcast. It would be all about cold calling. It'd be like, hey, we hire cohorts of 20 young people right out of college, and we train them a little bit about logistics and a lot about picking the phone up. And we know that 16, 17, 18 are going to get fired or quit. And we go, that's the process. We're just mining gold here, right?
Yeah.
And ruining lives. And if you're one of those young people, you go, oh my God, I went to college. And by the way, some people embrace it and go, oh, is this cool? I love it. They make it a game. And you started in that space, so you understand the cold calling.
Yes.
It just doesn't work the same as it did 20 years ago. Please elaborate.
So it doesn't work. You're right. It doesn't work the same way as it did. I think a lot of that just has to do with what happened through COVID. There was a massive shift in COVID where everyone went home, all the decision makers, whether they were shippers or transportation companies or technology companies, probably were always working from home. Let's face it. A lot of people just started working from home. And what did that cause? That caused the phones to be less of a useful modality. And so we became less connected over the phone. And a lot of times, the only time you will actually have a phone call is once you've developed some level of demand, either email or LinkedIn DM or meeting someone at a trade show or a personal connection. And so knowing that now, it's shifted a lot of companies that have been successful in the past to now being in a really struggling position, because through COVID, it was really easy and great to get new customers. And then you saw last April, you saw like that interest rate demand shifted. All of a sudden now it was like demand pulled back, and then inventories were high. They had to let that inventory bleed off through the end of last year. Then there was a little bit of a spike because inventories needed to get built up again. And then now we're in that fuzzy territory where we're not really sure what's going to happen this year when it comes to freight volumes, just because of where the interest rates are, where consumer demand is, and where a lot of companies weren't thinking about marketing. Now it has to be a part of your thought process, because if you don't replace the companies that are going to undercut you and bid you out of the process, you're going to go out of business. So where a lot of people through COVID, they didn't really have to think about it. Now this is the time to go out and work with someone like me who can get you that top of funnel so that you can actually get those appointments.
Yep. And again, outreach has changed. It's changed from not so long ago, I would say on my podcast, oh, cold calling doesn't work. And by the way, there's people who I talk to offline who really measure themselves. Some sales guys are very precise about this. And they say every year it's gotten a little harder to reach people by phone. And I joke about it, but it's no joke. When I was young, in the olden days, the phone rang. You did not usually have caller ID in the beginning. Then once you got caller ID, it almost didn't matter. You had to answer the phone. It could said Satan's calling. You had to answer the phone. and that's not the case anymore. Now, how many phone calls do you answer when you look and go, I don't recognize that number, or I wasn't expecting this phone call? You don't answer. So you knock on your door, you don't answer. It's a different world. So people know I don't have to answer the phone, and they don't. And so there's got to be a different way to reach out to them. And people like me who are content creators, I was a blogger for a long time. I've done tons of webinars. I've done a lot of podcasts. I would say, no, you have to let them all come to you. They'll reach out to you, Joe. That works. I'm a big fan. That definitely works. But if you want to take it to the next level, you have to marry these things together. You have to take cold outreach, like Matt the Guru does, and pair it with content, whatever the content is you're creating. And my friend Kevin Hill from Brush Pass Research, he told me years ago, the very best content is research. And I would agree, research is fantastic if you have research and you can do that with cold outreach. But I would also say video is some of the best content now. Audio is a great content, because as a writer, I can tell you this, it's hard to get people to read. I scan, right? You see an article, you look at the headers and go, boom, I read that in 1 minute. Anyway, please elaborate, Matt.
Yeah, I think that you're right, Joe. I really think that you're right. I think that our attention spans for reading has gotten way down. If we read to just get to whatever the major point is, it's like a lost art. Reading is a lost art now. A lot of what people do, if it's not video, it sometimes doesn't even get attention because listening, there are people who still listen while they're working. But yeah, I would say visual is the thing. And then, yeah, combining it with outreach is important, and combining it with a strategy is important. Like, for example, strategies about new things that are coming down the pike, right? Where is the economy today? Like I published when there was a build up to the electronic logging device mandate. I published about that, and I would send that content out because instead of just asking, there's a few different ways you can reach out to people and with context, right? There's trade shows. Hey, I'm going to be at this trade show. There's birthdays. There's holidays. And then there's news, and then there's, hey, this is this new service offering that we've got. So those are pretty much the 5 contexts that are really big when it comes to cold outreach. The one that's renewable that you can do all the time is essentially the video content that you produce, Joe. It's so valuable because people can come on, they can talk about their, what it is that they do, and then they can also talk about essentially how what they do, how it relates to their customer as you're able to fish it out.
Yep, I love it. I love it. Matt, tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you started Castriotta Growth Hacking.
I'm a military brat. I grew up all over. I was one of those guys. I went to college at three or I think 4. At this point, I can't remember exactly. I went to a prep school, a community college. I went to the Air Force Academy for a couple of years. I graduated from University of Tampa down here in Tampa, Florida. And then after that, I worked at a big company. I think they were the number 2 freight brokerage in the United States. They were led by a CEO. His name was Ken. Last name rhymed with Mokes. Great guy. Learned a lot at that first job. That was like the trial by fire combat that you're talking about. And then, of course, you've got to wait out the non-compete in between that and going to another company. And then I came back. I worked for another company, which was a great company to work with. Learned a lot, worked with them for about 7 years. They ended up selling to they ended up selling to Warner Enterprises. And while I was there, I had the ability I talked with some of the biggest companies in the world, finally tuned my process, my business development process. Not sure exactly how much I can tell you because there are NDAs involved with that, Joe. But needless to say, I've talked to the biggest companies, and I personally turned probably the biggest company in the biggest shipper when it comes to freight volume in the United States. I've turned those customers. So as a freight brokerage business development guy. And then I left there, and for the past 2.5 years, I've just been doing the exact same thing I was doing for them, for other people that didn't violate my non-compete. And now I'm ready to basically start really helping some companies grow incredibly fast. So I'm excited about that. But that kind of catches us up to today.
Yep. So you've lived, and it's 2 very large brokers. You've lived working in the freight brokerage space, and you've had success in those roles in those companies. And again, I will say you came up in the old way, which was you got to pick up those phones, you got to make those calls. I have no doubt you'd be good at that, but that just doesn't work as well as it once did. You still have to pick up the phone and you still ultimately have to talk to people. You don't talk to people, you don't close anything. But the ways that worked again 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, I would say, are not working as well. So we've all been told, get on social media, which I'm a big fan. Get on social media, create some content. Nobody's against that. I will suggest this. It's just not enough. And then I'm not doing it right now, but I'll probably turn it on in the coming months. Done a lot of email marketing. And when I say email marketing, that's different than cold outreach. So email marketing is I've developed a list over time, people who like my content, who've opted in, and it's a one-to-many. And by the way, a good email list like that, if you can create compelling content that you're proud of, that people want to read, fantastic. All for that. If you just work with me, email lists, nobody wants that. We've all been on those lists. And B2C, we're all on those lists where you think, oh, I'm going to buy a pair of shoes. I went over and I somehow gave them my email address or my name. And then they bombard you for the next 48 hours. You get 6 messages. And sometimes you see B2B businesses behaving like B2C businesses. Getting a new 3PL, getting a new broker, getting a new technology, they aren't going to buy it in the next 48 hours. So stop bombarding them. But anyway, there's all these different ways of attracting or reaching out to prospective customers. And I would say there's no one right way, but I will suggest that I think it's some combination of creating content, being famous, and I always use my friend Nate Shute used the term freight famous, right? And there's people, and I'll just think about this for a second on LinkedIn. Think about the people who in the freight business who create great content. And it might just be what they're doing in their life right now. It might even be something about work-life balance, about my kids, about a customer we love, just human stuff on LinkedIn. And some of it, I'm thinking about Charlie Safro. I shared a Uber last year with her on the way back to an airport with her and her team. And I remember I said, how do you do it? She creates really authentic, great content on LinkedIn. I guarantee people reach out to that. But not everybody is on LinkedIn scrolling. So sometimes you have to do the outreach, the prospecting. So enough of my blather, Matt. What do you think?
I think you're right, Joe. I think that, listen, you're like your prime example. Your brand is gold in logistics, right?
Thank you.
Everyone knows who Joe is. And I think that we have such little attention that ending up in an inbox is pretty much the most attention you're going to get. It forces an interaction because if someone is actively in business, they're going to look at their inbox. They're going to prioritize that over scrolling. Let's face it, as it gets tougher, as the market conditions get tougher out there, the sooner you start marketing, the better, because people will start to market more as the market gets tougher because they're going to lose business. They're going to find out that they have no choice but to market in order to survive through a cycle. And there's always an angle. There's always an angle that works. Like even in times like this where, listen, if you have a strong balance sheet, talk about diversification, right? You can say, hey, listen, like, how do you know that your vendors aren't going to go out of business in the next X amount of days? It's because because there's always an angle. You always have something that you can talk about in the media, right? And that media, like talking with you, Joe, like that's how you get that credibility. That's how you get the message out. You get the message out by having conversations with very credible people. You could argue, Joe, that you're maybe the most, if not second, or if not the most influential person in logistics. If you have a conversation with logistics people, you want to be able to borrow essentially that magic. And then because you talk to so many people, Joe, that you can speak from the customer's perspective and ask those questions. And yeah, it's never been more important to make that pivot into creating content, because that works. But also you have to empower it with outreach, because if it doesn't end up in an inbox and they're just like scrolling, unless you pay for it to be at the top of the feed, which I recommend that you do if you have good content. If you don't do that, you're not doing the right stuff.
Yep. So if you're looking for a TMS, please consider my friends at Revenova. Revenova is a cloud-based transportation management system built on the Salesforce platform, which means it has a built-in CRM and a higher level of security, reliability, and performance. Revenova is used by many of the top 3PLs, brokers, carriers, and shippers because it has all the features. It's multimodal, and it comes with lots of premium features like predictive pricing. If you want to learn more, please visit revenova.com. That's REVENOVA.com, or check the show notes for a link to my interview with Mike Horvath, one of the founders of Revenova. So, Matt, I want to switch gears on you for a second. Before we hit record, we talked quite a bit last week when there was the ruling on the non-competes. And I know it's going to take 120 days or probably 110 or whatever it is at this point. And by the way, I saw Cassandra Gaines had very good video. Perfect example of what we're talking about. She is an attorney. She's tracked this topic since the beginning. And I love the content. She made short video, whole bunch of people added. I texted you that, said, check this out. Texted it to a few friends. And because she's an authority. She knows what the hell she's talking about. And yeah, so we some changes in our space. I don't want to so much talk about the non-competes, but one of the other things that's gone on is 6 months, 8 months ago, we were all saying first quarter of next year, which would be 2024, the market's going to start, it's going to hit bottom and start going up. And we're all, of course, everybody who's a sales guy is a little optimistic, right? 2024 is going to be better than 2023. Now, did a podcast that published yesterday with DAT, and Dat said, hey, first quarter of 2025, give or take a quarter. So it could be the fourth quarter, could be the second quarter of 2025. But what we know is we're maybe hit bottom for rates. And I saw Kevin Hill, my good friend over at Brush Pass, said 3,000 freight brokers from last year are gone. So we used to have 30,000. Now we have 27,000. Those companies went out of business because the market, but let's face it, 27,000 did okay. I'm going to go out on a limb here, Matt, and say the 3,000 that failed weren't as good at sales as the 27,000 that stayed. So this is not just a nice to have. When you lose that many freight brokers in a year, and again, that carriers are a whole nother thing. And there's all the technologies, all the technology companies are all selling to companies who are making less money, who are laying people off potentially. So this is a challenging time.
It is, Joe. And you hit it right on the head. The 3,000 companies that went out of business, they weren't good at sales. And it is, when I was selling for the freight brokerage that I worked with, it was a family owned company. And I thought when I went into work every day, I thought of it like I was fighting for the families that worked there, right? Like and that's, I still maintain that thought process with my customers to this day. Like we're in a war when we talk about business, and it is really about investing in sales. It's going to cost you money no matter what you do. And it's times like these, whether it's the bottom or the top, the people at the top always get fed. Okay. And listen, the non-compete thing got me excited when you texted it to me, Joe, because I get really excited about that, because any sort of anti-competitive process, anything that's going to try to hold me down or other people down from competing, I feel like is probably holding our economy back. But listen, I understand the purpose of non-competes as well, if you're going to invest in salespeople's training. But I do think in the future, it's going to be less about which company that you work with, and it's going to be more about just these connectors that are salespeople that are just really great at connecting people, and they're really great at putting the pieces together. And if the non-compete goes away, my projection of what will happen will be, instead of you marketing to shippers in the future, you're going to be marketing to salespeople. So you're going to be, essentially, there's going to be a bunch of connectors that you're going to market your services to. There's going to be a lot of consolidation, and there's going to be a lot of people who there's going to be, probably right out the gate, as soon as the 120 days is up, and if it's not challenged, the second that the non-competes are null and void, every single person in the country every salesperson will be told by their employer, they have to be mandated that the non-compete is no longer. And it's ironic. When I saw that you sent it to me, the only people that have to stick to their non-competes are executives that make over a certain amount of money. So I was just thinking back to my career, and I was like, man, that is kind of some karma right there, because the executives are going to be stuck in these companies that they can't leave now. They're going to have to leave. I think the net losers on that are maybe some executives, but the sales guys, yeah, it's going to be interesting how it pivots.
I think it was something like you got to make over 150 grand. But yeah, getting back to it, we're in for another couple quarters of bad news. That's going to impact carriers. That's going to impact the sales people who are in all these organizations, whether it's a freight broker or a 3PL or a warehousing company, trucking company, whatever. We're all going to have a few more quarters. And again, I don't think the thought process should be just try to hang on. I think we should try and thrive during these times. And I want to talk about this topic, sales versus prospecting. So years ago, I told you this story before. Years ago, I went to spin training. spin sales, right? And I think a lot of people have been to that training. Great program. Nothing against it. And it was all about how do you manage this interaction with a prospective customer. And I think it's a 3-day course. And again, highly recommend it. And I said, towards the end, I asked the guy, what about getting the meeting? So we're in a meeting with somebody who can buy our services. And he says, oh, that's prospecting. We don't do that. And by the way, I suspect Spin has something now, but this was maybe 10 years ago. And I thought, oh, wait, you don't. So we do okay. My team and I were doing okay once we got meetings. We just didn't have enough meetings. Now, I will say this right now. When somebody reaches out to me because they like my podcast and they say, I would love to be on the podcast, I'd like to be a sponsor, advertiser, thought leaders, I want to be in the thought leadership program. I go, yeah, those are fairly easy sales when they reach out to you because they believe in it or somebody recommended it. Those are fairly easy sales. Other people who don't know who you are, don't know who I am, I have to reach out to them. So there's a big difference between sales and prospecting. And I would suggest that most people would say, we're pretty good once we get the meeting. But if you don't get the meeting, who cares? You can be the very best sales guy in the meeting, but if you only get one meeting a week, you are going to be let go eventually. So it all comes down to, and again, I'm going to use a few different terms interchangeably. I don't even know if that works, but prospecting, cold outreach, cold calling in the past, though that is the heavy lifting in this business. Am I right to say that?
It's heavy lifting, but you're spot on in that if you don't get the appointment, you can't close. If I can't get someone's time, I'm not going to be able to get somebody's money. And so I don't think that the actual dynamics of a call change when you do cold outreach via a digital modality. It's the same, right? And you want to have the guys that are battle tested in the closing seats in the appointments that you generate via digital outreach. But I think that the guys who were the demand generators, the cold callers of the past are now turning into the guys that are just answering the cold email responses. And then they're setting up the appointments with the guy who did like the 200 phone calls a day because he's got the confidence to be able to go into that meeting. And then the passing of the torch is essentially these appointment setters from a digital standpoint are now going to be transitioning into the closer role. So we basically have appointment setters that are doing digital outreach, and then we have these closers. The people that are not doing digital outreach are not closing, probably not closing. They're like closing 10% or 20% that the guys that are doing digital outreach are. And it has nothing to do with their sales training. You can invest in sales training all day. If you don't have the appointment, you got nothing. Okay.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So like you can sit here and invest in your people all day, but you could spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on sales training, and it will do good if you do not get those appointments. So I would say that, and you could argue that getting those appointments and spinning up more appointments may even be better than sales training because it's practicing live.
Yeah. So you've been helping me. You put people on you scheduled tons of appointments for me. And if you want to become a good salesperson, go to a lot of appointments, right? That's how it works. I think if somebody says, this is almost trial by fire. If somebody says, hey, how good a sales guy you are? I always say, I feel like I'm a decent sales guy, right? Somebody comes on, I'm talking to them about what I do. If I think it's a good fit, I try and suggest that it's a good fit for them. Great. I'm not one of those guys who does a ton of chasing on it. If somebody says, I don't know, I don't believe in it, whatever else, okay, I'm good with that. I do talk to a lot of people about what I do and how I do it and how I help people grow their business. If you don't want to believe, if you say, no, I don't believe in that, okay, fine. Not everybody believes in it. When I was writing websites and writing blog posts, sometimes I did ghostwriting for people. And some people would say to me, okay, so you're going to write that for us and it's going to be our CEO's name or whatever. And then we're going to share it. And if you share it through your social media, how much business are we going to get? I said, I don't know. How would I know that? How many people are going to read it, and who are they? Like, I can give you a little bit of information, but it's never going to be adequate. And I think in a lot of ways, marketing is a leap of faith, as sales is, as prospecting is. So when you say, hey, Matt, if you put everybody on my calendar, you fill up my calendar, how many am I guaranteed to get?
Yeah.
Depends on the day. This is human beings, right? It's not bits and bytes. They are actually have a say in it. But I do believe that the whole world has changed in this regard, is that cold outreach, whether it's from a SDR, BDR, so that business development rep or sales development rep, that's almost half a marketing job, if you ask me. And then we have all sorts of great marketers who are creating great content, who are trying to attract business to you. I'm not saying you even stop that. All I'm saying is that if you want to turbocharge, you have to do more cold outreach. And if you're creating great content, in so many ways, it's not cold outreach because they already know who you are. So a lot of people who you've put on my calendar are from my contacts. When you put them on my calendar, they go, oh yeah, hi Joe, how's it going? I know you. We've been connected on LinkedIn, or I follow your content, whatever it is. So I think it's joining both of those. If I should say, what's the best thing you can do for your prospecting besides hiring Matt? I would say creating great content.
Yeah, no, I would. They go hand in hand, Joe. The future, because AI is going to be out there, we have to get ahead of those soft skills, right? The communication skills that they were always talking about, how how it was going to be in the future, how engineering jobs were going to be less important. It was going to be more important that we knew how to communicate and read one another. And then wasn't it interesting, Joe, that once you started getting appointments, your mindset on sales changed, right? You got the confidence as a salesperson from being able to understand that there's always going to be another call on your calendar because what you're doing is a process, right? And it used to be that creating a process was picking up the phone and making a certain amount of dials a day, okay? That is no longer the case. That is not where you're going to get the highest value added customers today in logistics, in supply chain. It's just not. The highest value added customers that you can get are going to be a person that you send a video to, and it's going to be it's going to be a warmish cold outreach where you have a good angle and it's combined with some level of content. That is the most ideal thing you can do with the tightest context. If it's going to a transportation marketing sales association, if it's hitting every single one of those guys up on LinkedIn with this video, for example, like that's a potential content strategy for me to be able to get clients in the logistics space, right? For a technology company, maybe it's talking about, how their technology solves a particular problem and then sending that video to all of their audience. But reality is that trust is the most important thing in this economy right now, especially in a recession. And so if people don't work with people like you, Joe, okay, sometimes business cases don't even matter. Sometimes the most important thing is that they explain the product and then it's also blessed by somebody, for lack of a better word, like you, who can basically say, listen, like this guy is legit. I checked him out.
Yeah, social proof matters. It always has and it always will. You trust the people who you trust. And if somebody's on my podcast, obviously I trust them. I think they're worth having on my podcast. I think they have something interesting to share. You've been a great asset for me in that you've helped open my mind up to cold outreach more. And I think also just filling up the calendar, it really does help. It really does help when you go, oh, okay. And I think there's a lot of content creators who almost think, oh, yeah, well, I create content. I don't have to do any more than that. You do. And the best companies are creating enormous amounts of content and sharing it. And by the way, the content has to be good. You mentioned AI. I think the AI is fantastic. I'm not against it. The challenge is AI does not at this one moment know anything that the internet doesn't know. So what it's doing, or that large language model, so it's always going to be creating recycled ideas that might be well written, but it's recycled. So, so Matt, if somebody is listening and says, yeah, Matt, I like the sounds of this. We need more. We need help on the prospecting. We need help on the cold outreach. We need more of our cold outreach to turn into gold. What does it look like when they talk to you?
First thing they got to do is get on my Calendly, right? And I would suggest everyone that has a technology product that they're looking to sell to get in the habit of getting people through Calendly. It allows you to get some initial questions answered, and then it allows people to quickly and efficiently get on your calendar. You can tie Calendly into your HubSpot instance or your Salesforce instance or your Pipedrive instance so that you can see all of the different appointments as they come in, and then gauge how many appointments you're getting on a daily basis, monthly basis, etc. What's the close rate? And then once people have set up an appointment with me on my calendar, I have a 30-minute conversation with them where I go over what I do. I want to learn what they do. We talk about questions and next steps if it makes sense. I have a very executive level conversation about targeting and messaging and how I would put together the entire outreach strategy for them. And then the answers at the end are either yes, no, or I need to think about it or talk with my team, in which case I put them on the calendar for a future date. Or if they're at a yes, I tell them, hey, this is when are you going to be able to get that contract back for me? And then I send them an agreement it's just an agreement. It's month to month with 30 notice for cancellation. I've got payment processor link and a Calendly link where they set the onboarding. Onboarding is about an hour where we go over messaging and targeting again for the strategy. We set them up, whether it's 5 LinkedIns and 2 email seats, or whether it's 5 LinkedIns, 2 email seats, and an ad campaign, or whether I'm scraping emails for them, or whether I'm running an ad budget for them, whatever it is. And it usually takes between a week to 2 weeks to get set up and spinning. And then the results usually are pretty instant. As you imagine, how long did it take you to get your first appointments, Joe?
Not long at all. I would say within a week or so. And again, it's a fantastic thing because, again, I do believe everyone I've talked to, I don't feel like I'm abusing my network. I don't feel like I'm doing anything that is off brand. I don't feel spammy. No, I hope no one feels that way. But I've introduced you to a number of people who are very happy with what you do. And I had to tell you, there's a real challenge in this market. People are spending less money. And I just really, truly think that you have to double down on your prospecting. And some can say double down on your sales. Doubling down on your prospecting is going to get you more sales. It's that you can't have sales before you have the prospecting. People can still say no, but if you say, hey, I've got twice as many meetings because I'm working with Matt, then you're going to get twice as much sales and maybe more.
Yeah.
I would also say, people have asked me, say, I love your outreach. And I always say, oh, you talked to my buddy Matt. Honestly, I'm not even making that up. People have said, I love your outreach because you're good at messaging. So there's a lot of people who do cold outreach to me where you just want to say, don't ever, not interested, or delete it. It might throw it in your spam folder. There's other messages that you get where you go, oh, this is interesting. This is intriguing, right? You're good at that. And not everybody is.
Yeah, no, it's important. Cold outreach has never been more important. And in times like this, that we haven't seen the end of the bloodshed when it comes to companies going out of business. Okay. It is going to get worse before it gets better because there's going to be a period of time where it's going to take time to get back up to where it was. This is the time right now through the summer, as if you're a logistics company or if you're a selling company, if you're a technology company, this is the time for evaluation of cost saving technologies.
Or if you're raising money.
Or if you're raising money, like there's one of the startups that I work with just got a $5 million debt financing opportunity from the United States government. It's in cybersecurity. We took them to all the different people that could have potentially been customers. We found out that you have to walk in with either venture capital or you have to work in with a top company in order to get some level of respect as a cybersecurity firm. And we finally, after talking to basically private sector and government, we finally found a good fit. And I will tell you that we did it within 5 months. And so it's very possible to find a fit. And that was from zero. That was from I don't know anything about cybersecurity. My customer is a person who doesn't know anything about sales or marketing. He's great at cybersecurity, and we passed him in front of every single person. It's the same thing for any technology company. So yeah, no, I have non-disclosures with a lot of my clients, but I can tell you that's Y2 Combinator backed companies, work with a lot of them. And yeah, if you need any help with outreach, yeah, this is the way to go.
Yeah, Matt, I got to tell you, I've said this to people in giving sales advice, and I've also experienced it myself. If you don't have enough prospects, if you don't have enough sales beyond the sale where you say, okay, that prospect turned to a good lead, I'm following up with them. We've all been in this position where I got these three guys. One of them is going to close. I think even two of them could close. And you start to obsess. And I always say, and then it becomes almost like you're in the friend zone with these companies. I use that term where you're like, that one is never going to buy from me, but they're nice enough to me. So I keep talking to them. And it gives you the sense that you're doing sales activity, but you're in the friend zone. You're not winning that business. And if somebody held a gun to your head and said, are you going to win that? You'd say, no, absolutely not. You know you're doing it. And the reason we do that is because there's not enough opportunity coming from our pipeline. When I started podcasting years ago, I started having many more leads, right? So I never fret about it. I never left a sales meeting where they said no and thought, oh my God, all is lost. I never felt that way again because I have content. Working with you, I've seen even a bigger increase in meetings. So it makes life a lot easier if you're creating content. And I'm telling you, creating content is great, but again, you have to pair it with outreach like you're doing. And again, the name of the podcast, Turning Cold Outreach into Gold, you've done that for me. And you've also done it for a number of friends who I've connected you with. So thank you. And again, I highly recommend what you're doing.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much.
So I'm going to summarize, then I want to get your final thoughts on the topic, Matt. So I'm talking to my friend, Matt Castriotta, and we're talking about turning cold outreach into gold. So Matt, you use a whole bunch of different tools. You use LinkedIn, you use advertising, messaging, all sorts of things to put people on your customers' calendars. As I've said, it works for me. We have a challenging market over the next I think we're going to be scraping along the bottom here when I say that's the freight market. And the freight market seems to determine what the freight brokers do and what the technology companies are doing, what the funding is doing. Everybody is impacted by this down market. So if you don't want to be one of those companies that goes under in the next 6 months, you need to do well in sales. And I would also say the next point I want to make here, Matt, is there's a big difference between sales and prospecting. Or when I say prospecting, I'll use that interchangeably with cold outreach. If you don't do well at prospecting and cold outreach, you will not do well in sales. Next, just this whole idea of if you're turbocharging your outreach with content. You want to create great content, whether it's research or being on a podcast like mine, video, whatever you're going to do, create great content, pair it with that outreach. You're going to do so much better. And yeah, I think that's it, Matt. Final thoughts. Put a big old bow on this one.
First, I want to say I appreciate you and I'm grateful to have you in my
Thank
life.
you.
Okay. You're a great guy. I think that there's nothing to fear in this market. You should work with great partners, amazing partners, the partners that will be able to get you to be able to make it through this part of the cycle. And in times like this, it's almost better for my business in times like this because I am one of the top B2B marketers in the world. And you are the top logistics guy in podcasting. And so when people work with guys like us, Joe, they can be confident that they're able to receive the best service possible. They're able to check that box in the best possible way through this period of time. And so I'll just leave you with, if you'd like to schedule a call, you've got a Calendly, Joe. I've got a Calendly.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, and any other links you give me. I'll put a link to your Calendly and people can get right on it. I'm also a big user of Calendly. It works great. Matt, before we hit record, we were talking about conferences and we were talking about Transportation Marketing and Sales Association. I know you will be there in June.
I'll be there.
Yeah. And I know you said I know you've been under a logistics non-compete. I think that's ended. So you will, this law came too late for you, Matt, because yours ended anyway, but you will be at a lot of the logistics conferences coming up. TBD. If you want to reach out to Matt, you will find him, or more likely he'll find you.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Anyway, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely, Joe. Thank you so much for having me.
Yep. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.